Good morning, Owl Crown Tarot family. Today I will be doing a video on what is tarot, some uses for tarot, and some different ways to interpret tarot. Tarot is a tool or system that is primarily used for divination or divinatory purposes. They can also be used for meditation, path walking, rituals, spells, as well as inspirations for music and writing, and also playing cards. Maybe like last year, me and a few friends, we wanted to play spades, and we didn't have any like traditional, like I guess you say, like playing card decks around. But we had a tarot deck around that I had for a while that we really didn't use. Like it didn't have any intention set or anything on it. So I knew which cards to took out or to take out to make it a regular playing deck. And we end up using that deck to play spades, and it was actually kind of interesting. The stories, that it was telling, and like different circumstances that were going on between me and my friends, so that was interesting to use tarot cards as uh, playing cards. There's also a game that you can play with tarot. I don't remember what it's called off the top of my head, where you use the 22 major arcana cards as different playing cards. Um, but I guess you would say like a definition of tarot, definition I found on the internet of tarot, is a set of any 22 playing cards that have allegorical representation and is used for fortune telling. I would say a more modern definition of tarot would be a deck of 78, guess you can say, playing cards that have uh, pictures that have different meanings and representations. Um, so the tarot can be broken down into two major categories. The first major category would be the major arcana. The major arcana is dealing with matters of archetypal forces and different archetypes, uh, natural cycles, just things that kind of happen around and about us that are kind of outside of our control. They can also represent different situations we find ourselves in and different roles that we play throughout our life and our lifetime. Um, then you have the minor arcana. Example of the minor arcana. The minor arcana deals with uh, areas of life, different areas of life. There are four different suits to the minor arcana, and just an example of each one. So you have the wands. Wands corresponds to fire. Wands represents energy, growth, new ideas, personal enterprise, desires. Wands is like it's kind of like the energetic of wands is like the go getter. Being very entrepreneurial. Like kind of like I see it, I want it, like I'm going to go get it, and I'm going to go take it. That's the energy of wands. And then you have cups. Cups corresponds to water. Cups represents our emotions, our receptivity, our sensuality, our sexuality, our intuition, and psychic insight. And this relationships, just the ways that we connect to other people. Cups is a very relationship based suit. Then you have swords. Swords corresponds to air. Swords represents aggressions, ambitions, conflict is also desire there. Struggle, And swords is the most complicated suit out of all the suits. Is definitely the most dynamic. That's because there's just so much going on there. And that could be either positive or negative depending on the context of the reading. Um, but yeah, swords definitely is just it's a lot of like swords are typically negative in connotation. Other unless stated otherwise, based on other cards that are around it. The only one card that's kind of like relaxed in the entire like sword suit is the Four of Swords, and that's the kind of like the card is known as the Lord of Rest from Strife. So meaning like it's like the break from drama and conflict. But outside of that, like swords is kind of like very aggressive energy, and very like combative in nature. And then the last suit, which is the coins are pinnacles. Coins are pinnacles. Deals with matters of course, coins, money, property, finances, and financial interests. It also deals with the physical world. Just things. It's dealing with the things that like we can see and touch. Uh, yeah, that would be like a real basic definition, I would say, for pinnacles. But it could also deal with issues relating to your body or your physical health. But yeah, again, pinnacles is really like just dealing with the physical mundane world that we can see and touch, and actually experience. We can experience all the other suits or different worlds, but pinnacles is like the most concrete one that we feel. Each one of the suits has elemental correspondence or associations. These elemental associations or these elements play a different role, kind of not as less significant, but yeah, they have their role in the reading. So the elements are fire, earth, water, and air. Kind of said that all over the place, but they each correspond to a different suit. So fire is masculine in nature. Fire represents energy, vitality, issues and dealings of leadership, domination, vitality, your passions and desires, and spirituality. As the also creativity. Um, then you have water, which is feminine in nature. It is reflective. It represents our receptivity, our reflection, our ability to reflect. It also represents our emotions, our sexuality, our desires, and psychic insight. The same thing following is kind of like mirroring uh, cups. And then you have air. Air represents aggression, but air more so deals with ideas, intellect, exchanging of ideas, discernment, discrimination, being flexible, being swift, and kind of like being not judgmental, but judgmental. Having the ability to discern, I guess, is like having the ability to be like, okay, there is a benefit and a negative to whatever situation that is I'm in right now, and try to make the best of it based on information you have. And then there's Earth. Earth. Earth is feminine in nature. Earth represents fertility, community, family life, and your achievements. And stability. So that would be what each one of the suits and the elements by themselves represent, and then they kind of mesh together. And that plays a part more so when you look at the court cards more than anything. We'll get to that pretty soon. A real simple like breakdown of that. But each one of these suits are broken down. Like I said, excuse me, is number 1 through 10, or ace through 10, and then there are four court cards. Oh, I guess we can get into the court cards now. The four court cards are the page, the knight, the queen, and then the king. Each one of these cards has their own elemental combination of association. There are four members of a court per suit. So, for example, the page of pentacles would be earth of earth when you look at it from an alchemical standpoint. And that gives you more insight into what's kind of going on, what situations are going on, and what people are coming to and fro in the person's life. Those are just some different things that the court card represents. When I usually see a court card in a reading, I'm usually thinking person, place, and thing. More particularly like people, either people of very high influence or people that are coming to bring me something, or a potential like ally or enemy. Court cards, just always have me on my toes. They're just complicated and very interesting to look at. When you're looking at different tarot spreads. So now, some different ways to interpret tarot. So the first way to interpret tarot that comes to my mind would be photography. Is just actually like looking at the picture and see what that tells you, like what impressions and things you get from that. Then there will be looking at tarot from a Kabbalistic standpoint. Looking at tarot from a Kabbalistic standpoint is using a understanding of tarot and Kabbalah and the tree of life to render an interpretation. Then there will be astrology, so using the astrological correspondence of the major arcana and the minor arcana. An example of this would be here. So this is the Two of Wands. The astrological correspondence would be Mars and Aries. So for those who do astrology, you could use that information to see like what is the different energetic or energy pattern that's playing out, in that particular card. As we know, that's dealing with wands, so that's dealing with something that has to do with personal enterprise. Actually, I'm going to use this as an example for interpretation. So, as far as photography, we see that we have a man, looking over a balcony, and he has the world in his hand. So he's kind of, trying to figure out different ways to possibly not necessarily take over the world, but we could, say that because wands and fire deal with domination. So he's looking at the world, trying to figure out, how can I make this thing mine? Like I desire the world. How can I make it happen? So then if we were to look at this from a Kabbalistic standpoint, the Two of Wands, that would be in the Absolute plane. So that is the highest plane, the realm of fire or spirit. And that would be dealing with the second Sephiroth, which would be Chokmah. So that is looking at, we can say like the fiery aspects or the spiritual aspects of Chokmah, and Chokmah is wisdom. And then going to the astrological interpretation, we can look at the Mars and Aries. Mars is the planet of warfare and conflict, aggression. And Aries is the sign actually of Mars. So that is conflict, aggression, war, fighting. It's just a lot of fighting. Um, but also could be leadership. If we were to look at this from a different standpoint, if you were able to do the if you were to do the astrological correspondence for the entire deck, what this would actually mean is this is the Tower card and the Emperor. So this is how the Emperor acts when the Tower, when he sits on his tower. This is the Emperor sitting on his tower. He's trying to figure out how can he take over the world. Then you have numerology, and numerology is using the numbers in the tarot cards to give an interpretation. That's what the major arcana and the minor arcana is kind of difficult to do that with the court cards because they don't have any numbers. And then actually I don't need this anymore. Then they actually I do. There's symbolism, which is using the different symbols in the card. So for example, the globe, the wands, the different roses, the red and white roses, the different clothes that he wears and the colors to give an interpretation. And then there's intuition, which is when you first look at this card, you know, what does the card tell me and how does the card make me feel? So those would be some different ways to interpret tarot. As far as different ways to use tarot, so outside of using tarot for divination, you can use tarot for meditation. So an example of this would be to take a card out of the tarot deck, again using my example, and using that card as a fixed point of focus, and seeing what ideas and thoughts come via looking at that card. What this kind of does in the mind is one way that you can go about this meditation process is look at the tarot card, you know, for however long until you kind of have like the image kind of like burnt into your memory, and then close your eyes and then turn that tarot card into a door. And that goes into path walking. When you go about using the tarot that way, you can see different ways that these cards play out, like the energetics of, you know, what do these different cards mean, and how they will mishmash, you know, when you give a reading. So that's meditation that led into path walking. Just talking to go over or just talk about path walking. Traditionally, when you're using the tarot to go through a path walking process, you're going through the Fool's Journey, which is using the 22 major arcana to kind of go through the different pathways on the tree of life. That's actually a very good way. That's one of the ways that I learned the tree of life and the different paths. If you remember the 22 cards, you can remember the 22 paths, and you can remember the 22 paths, you can remember the 22 Hebrew letters. It kind of like it just all flows. And each one of these 22 paths or tarot cards corresponds to astrology, some concept in astrology. So it kind of is a very easy system that you can use to learn three systems, which would be tarot, astrology, and Kabbalah. As far as using it in rituals and spells, you could either place a candle that you're using. You're like I would say, like whatever ritual you're doing or spell, you can pull a card that's appropriate for your ritual or your spell work, and have that be a point of focus to either enhance the ritual, to allow the spell to kind of like play out and play through. And then, as far as using the tarot for inspiration for writing or music, I think that one's kind of self-explanatory, especially when you like really understand like the nature of tarot and the different mechanics. So, for example, if you wanted to write a story, you could, or if you wanted to write a play, I actually did this before. I didn't really write a play. I just kind of like did the concept. But from my understanding, a play is typically three acts broken. Three acts broken down into three different parts. So Act One, Part One, Act Two, Part Two, Act One, Part Three, so forth and so on. So that would be a total of 9 cards. So let's say, for example, since I got the full right here, this would be my main character. So I would place this card at the top, and then I would shuffle my deck, and I would place 9 cards down. Each one of these cards corresponded to the beginning of the story, the middle of the story, and the end of the story. And I would just, take the time and write, what I felt, or come up with different ideas and situations that the fool could be in. Since that's our example, which is the fool. I didn't use the fool, I used the magician when I actually did this. But see, different scenarios and situations that could play out. The interesting thing is that depending, and I had to put kind of like a caveat here: do not use your main tarot deck to do that, because that's what I did, and then the story actually kind of like played out. So that was also interesting, it kind of made me realize that I had co-author rights in my life. But yeah, so that would be the video. I know it's a little lengthy, but I hope you guys enjoy it. Hope you got something out of it. Subscribe down below, and look for future videos in the future. Peace.